Before we dive into today's episode, I have something truly special to share. Next September, I'll be leading an intimate women's retreat through the south of France and northern Italy, and you're invited. Picture this: mornings exploring the colorful markets of the French Riviera, afternoons sipping wine, and a hotel view with golden Mediterranean sunsets. Whether you love photography, food, or just want to reconnect with your playful creative self, this trip is designed for you. Spots are limited, so if all this sounds like your kind of adventure, please visit tourwithabsolutely.com and look for the tour France and Italy with Crystal. You can also send me a message or check out the show notes. Claudine Hemingway is a descendant of famed writer Ernest Hemingway. We bumped into each other at a party and decided to team up and dive deep into French history, but with a twist, by bringing a spotlight to those lesser-known creatives in France. This is History with a Hemingway. I'm back with Claudine, and today we're talking about the Arc de Triomphe Carousel. It was under construction for a long time, but I think we are back in business now.
It is finally reopened, and it is absolutely amazing. It was kind of finished pretty much in time for the Olympics because it is there close to the Tuileries, which played a pretty monumental role in the Olympics and the Paralympics. But I love this one, and I worked on for months trying to get every detail and find out what every detail on that thing meant. And like usual, these things aren't easy to come by, but I don't know how to stop. So here we are.
We love the rabbit holes you go down.
We love the rabbit hole, except for sometimes it goes so deep that I forget where I am. So, but I want to share with this because this is, there's the two major arcs in the city. There's actually four, but everybody knows the Arc de Triomphe, the very big one that's at the end and the top of the Champs-Élysées. And then there's the other two, Saint-Martin and Saint-Denis. Those are off onto the, over on the right bank and deeper into the right bank. And then there's Arc de Triomphe de Carousel. And this one is the one that is closer to the Louvre. But first off, we'll tell you why, because it is a carousel. And a lot of people might think they know what a carousel is or a merry-go-round. But it was a very different thing a very long time ago. And on June 5th and 6th in 1662, there's 15,000 people that was there in front of what is the Place de Carrousel. It was the last feast in Paris that Louis XIV had, and he did this basically to announce and say, because he finally had his first son. He finally had his first child, and it was a son. So they did that, but what most historians believe that he really did this for a chick.
No way. That's like
for a girl.
Biggest flex.
I know. So, it is Louis XIV. So Louis was also trying to impress his mistress, Louise de la Baume Leblanc, at the time. She was a mistress. He had 5 kids with her, and they legitimized 2 of them.
That happens to the best of us.
It does. And, I would really love to do probably more than one episode about the illegitimate children of the kings. And some of them, like Louis XIV and Henry IV, had a lot of them. And some of them they legitimized, which basically means you get money, but you would still, even if you were the firstborn son of the king and you were legitimized, you still don't get to go. You still don't get to be king.
That would be very upsetting, I feel like, especially in such poor, difficult times.
I know, you're like, I'm so close, but so far. But a carousel was after Catherine de Medici, and when Henry II, her husband, was killed basically in a jousting accident. He died days after. A piece of the wood lance got into his eye and he died of sepsis. She outlawed jousting. So they did, in turn, changed it later to this thing called a carousel. And the carousel was, there'd be the men and people on their horses, and there would be these big, huge, tall poles that would have these ribbons hanging down with big rings. And part of it was that they had to ride around and put these lances, which it's kind of like just, well, now you're stabbing at rings instead of people. And you grab these rings, and whoever had the most, it was kind of a big thing of who won. And it was just this pageantry that went around. But later, these things, they would end up becoming a carousel, as we know, of a merry-go-round. And when merry-go-rounds first appeared, they were for adults and they were the same thing. People would ride on these horses, these stationary horses, and on the outside of the carousel in the ground would again be the same thing, these poles with these ribbons, and they'd have these jousting sticks and try to catch them. And the first merry-go-rounds were for adults, never for children.
Well, I like that because I feel that way now. I love a good merry-go-round.
I know they're so fun. I do love to get on to get on one of those. But the very first one in Paris was the one in the Jardin de Luxembourg, and it was designed by Charles Garnier of the Opera Garnier. But so you would think like that's one of the most beautiful buildings in Paris, and you go there thinking it's going to be this amazing merry-go-round. Nope, it's pretty plain.
Big letdown, big letdown.
It was like, but it is done by Charles Garnier, and it's really deep into the garden. But it is kind of funny because you're like, oh, Charles Garnier did one. That's got to be amazing. So the name stuck. They kept it there. So that is why it is called the Place de Carrousel and the Arc de Triomphe de Carrousel. Now, the arc itself goes back to another gentleman that had a larger than life ego, Napoleon. So Napoleon Bonaparte, the first one. And he was 19 years old at the revolution in 1789. By 1792, he was a captain. 1795, a major general. In 1796, he went off and he was the general of the Italian campaign. And in 1799, on November 9th, he had his coup d'etat and he was named the first consul. And on December 2nd, 1805 or 1804, he was named emperor. And that date is coming up. And don't you know it? We'll have a podcast episode all about that event. But he wanted to have an arc that was built, same thing with the big arc, that he wanted to have something, this thing that his soldiers could come back notoriously and ride into the city under this Arc de Triomphe. And so he was inspired by the Constantine Arc in Rome. And so he wanted this design. He wanted both of them done. But the only one he ever saw finished was this one, that's by the Louvre.
Wonder why.
Well, the other one's pretty big. But this also lays on the Axe Historique. So if you stand at the Louvre and you're by the statue of Louis XIV on a horse, the Bernini statue, where I know you like to meet some of your clients when you're doing photo shoots, you stand there and you look straight and you look through it goes. If you stand behind him on a good clear day, it's a perfect way to see it. The horse goes underneath the arc. It goes through the Tuileries. Then you see the obelisk. And then it goes from there to the Arc de Triomphe de Carousel, Arc de Triomphe at the top of the Élysée. And then it goes all the way out to Arc de Triomphe in La Défense. And it's one historic line. And it was laid out in the 17th century that way.
That was some great planning. I mean,
That was pretty good planning. And the Lenotre did that. But the way, if you look at the Arc de Triomphe Carousel, it does set off at a funny angle. And that was because when that was put in, the Palais de Tuileries was there. And this was really kind of the entrance into the Tuileries. There was a gate that went from the arc to the left and the right. So it was literally a gate to get into the Tuileries this way. And if you stand on the other side, it's almost like this keyhole into the Louvre, but it doesn't line up. When you really do stand by the horse or you're looking through, you see the horse, it doesn't line up with the pyramid, which some people mistakenly think when they talk about the axis. It does not go to the pyramid. It starts at that because it did line up into the Tuileries. And if you look at the Louvre up above, like on Google Earth or even a drawing of it, or a map of it, it is not, it kind of bends out to the side. So it's not this perfectly perpendicular building. So it all kind of lines up that way. But this arc itself, it was decided in a decree by Napoleon on February 26, 1806, that he was going to have this created for his army. On July 7th, they finally laid the first stone. And here's another fun thing. It was finished on April 26, 1807. So another thing to add to my birthday list.
Your birthday list. I love it.
All the fantastic people of April 26th. Now there's another thing. So that's pretty exciting. But the sculptures were finally added and it was finished in 1908 in August. The architect for it was Pierre Fontaine. Fontaine did a lot of the work on the Louvre under Napoleon, and also Vivant Denon. And Denon is the one that the whole wing of the Louvre, that's the busiest wing where the Mona Lisa is and everything, that is named after him. He was the first director of the Louvre. And it was all created between the two. They butt heads a lot because Fontaine would design things and then Denon would change it. He did most of the sculpture and the decor. He on it, you'll see there is bas reliefs. There is the 8 statues of the soldiers on the top. He used 22 separate sculptors to do this. So almost everything on there. There's only a few things on the underside that were done by the same people, but everything else was done by different sculptors, which is kind of cool.
And they did such a good job of like keeping the same style in many ways.
They did, and it's real fun when you are remembering all these names. So the 22 is a lot. Maybe they could have used one or two, but it is pretty amazing. And the higher up the relief is, the better sculptor it was. So they were like, okay, these are the top-notch guys. They're doing the ones on the top.
Yeah, they were like a hierarchy of goodness.
Yeah, and a lot of this stuff was designed. They would design that an artist would actually design it by Charles Mignet. He was the one that was drawing out and what these reliefs would be, and the soldiers and everything. But the sculptures, if you look, and I'll put pictures on my website, if you look at what the original idea was to what finally is done, it is a little different because each sculptor kind of took their own little bit of that they wanted to do. But I'll go through some of them, and Denon specifically wanted to use peaceful scenes. He didn't want to use these scenes of battle, of, Napoleon killing people and, horses being shot with a cannonball. Like if you saw the movie, he wanted to use these peaceful scenes. So on the east facing side that faces the Louvre, up above, there's Victory and Fame that's up there, that's done by Auguste Dumont. And on the right side, it's the Italian Empire. So the left is the French Empire, the right is the Italian Empire, and it's Wisdom and Strength by Gerard. And then around the top, there's 8 of the statues of the soldiers, and every one of those had to be recreated this time because they were in such bad shape because of the limestone that was used on it. And one thing that I learned when I was looking into the job of the restoration, which I find so fascinating, and how living here, and when you walk through places like the Tuileries and the Luxembourg, and it has that super fine gravel, almost sand. And when you're walking through and somehow those little things get into your shoe and it feels like you're walking on a boulder,
For sure.
the worst. When there is sometimes wind that comes through Paris, it's almost like a mini tornado. And so what happened is it picks that up, and the Arc de Triomphe was actually getting like sandblasted because the wind will pick up those little tiny rocks and just bash against the sculptures. And between that and like acid rain that we have and pollution, it was just like the faces on those soldiers at the top were just gone.
I believe it. Sometimes I have photo shoots in there with clients and like it gets pretty scary.
It does get kind of scary, especially the wind. The wind lately here has been no joke. It's like, and I saw a video of what actually looked like a mini tornado going through the Luxembourg.
Yeah, I've literally seen it spin up like a tornado.
Yeah, yeah. And so it's interesting. It literally will sandblast these things. So they had to recreate them all. So what they did is they had a few copies already. There were some copies of 4 of them at the Armée Museum, and there was a few other places. So they did a bunch of 3D rendering of these. And they made them out of styrofoam, like full-size styrofoam renderings. And then the sculptor used that to recreate them. And then the kind of neat thing about it is the same thing happening at Notre Dame. While they are capturing and copying these exactly from the original, they will add the way one sculptor does hair or does the texture of the helmet or something like that. They all have their kind of little mark. So while they are copying it, they still will have like their, mark onto it.
I love that they add their little touch.
Yeah, it's so cool. So the statues on the Louvre facing side across the top, is and these are all our army that fought under Napoleon. The first one is the Coursier, and that was he was in the 1803 Napoleonic Army, and that was done by Auguste Dumont. And he this there none of these. There's only one of them that is an actual person that was done after, but most of them they're not. This isn't like Soldier Frank. But there's two of them that were actually also done by Géricault. So Géricault's done two paintings of these kinds of soldiers. The next one is a dragon. They fought from 1678. They fought on horseback, but then they would come in on horseback, but then fight on foot. That one was done by Charles Courbet. The next one is the chasseur à cheval. So he was also on a horse. This is another one captured by Géricault. And the Carabinet is another one. And these are the ones on the front looking towards the Louvre. And it's fascinating. Like, definitely go and check those out. And this is one of those episodes you could kind of take with you. On the lower side of the Louvre facing, you have the capitulation of Ulm, which is in Germany. This was something that happened on October 20th, 1805, where they captured 23,000 Austrians. This was by Pierre Cartier. And on the other side, it was the Battle of Austerlitz, which is probably the one we always hear about because there's so many things named Austerlitz here. That was on December 2nd, 1805. It was the first anniversary of when he had named himself emperor. And this one is also kind of called the relief of the czars and the empire, because you have Francois Premier of Austria there, who was a Holy Roman Emperor. You have Alexander the First of Russia, and then you have Napoleon. This is the Battle of the Three Emperors, and that's on that side. And then they have the frieze that are there. You have children in these frieze. There's also trophies and arms that were done on there. And then the cornice is by Bessignier and Terran. So that goes all the way across. It's pretty amazing. And then there's stuff on the north and south side too. So the north, the relief is the entree into Vienna, and that was done by Dessigné. And then on the west side, when we're looking towards the Tuileries, facing the Tuileries, it's again the French Empire on the left with history and arts, and on the right, the Italian with Apollo and the arts up there. And then the statues, you have the Grenadier, and then he was the elite soldier. This was done by Robert Daval. The Carabiner, who is Antoine Mouton. The Canonnier, who is done by Pierre-Charles Bridon. And then the last one is the Sapeur. This was done by Edmé Dumont, and this was the one that was an actual soldier named Dominique Gale Marion. He was in 1807. He was in a Napoleonic army, and when Napoleon saw him, when he was inspecting the troops, he was holding a cannon. Like, basically now what we see in war movies, like a rocket launcher that you'd hold, that's kind of what he was holding. And when Napoleon saw it, he was like, what is this? But a sapeur, which if you are an avid followers of the French firemen, they are sapeur pompier. And a sapeur is they would go into these battle scenes in advance, and they'd go and dig trenches and build walls out of wood. And they do all this before, and then they'd fight. So that was their job. And that's what this guy, and he's got this big, huge hat on, and he is pretty cool, but he's the only one based on a real person.
That all sounds exhausting, this trench digging, all this fight. It's wild.
I mean, the war back then was, now it's like they just push a button and drop some bombs.
Yeah, it's like a video game now, a drone.
It's horrible. But back then, I mean, it's crazy the things that they had to do. But the lower side that has the entry to Munich, that was October 24th, 1805. This is when they put the alliance with France into place. That was by Louis Dessigné. And on the right is the interview of Tilsit. And that is, again, you have another Francois I of Austria and Napoleon, December 4th, 1805. And that's done by Philippe Lesueur. And on the south side, the one that I think is kind of neat is the Peace of Pressburg, which is now Slovakia. That is with Napoleon and Francois I, and it's December 26, 1805. And that was the one that, if you look, there's like this band that you could see the astrological symbols on it. And I think that one's kind of the neatest one. And that faces the south side. Underneath it, in the work, like next time you're over there, go and look at it and just go hopefully early in the morning, like when you guys are on your way to the office at the at the Trocadero, stop and just go look because the work they did on it is amazing. And some of the stuff that they did when they did the restoration, like maybe this little arm of the child Cupid was completely worn away. So they did where they would cut that out and then they did almost like a plug. And I watched a video of how they did it and they cut this new piece. It's like a triangle piece, but it almost looks like a Lego. You know, on the top of a Lego, it has like the dots that stick up and they'd
Yeah,
be like 4 times as long. So they put him into the spot like a plug and then they resculpt it from that.
that sounds so beautiful.
It's pretty amazing. I mean, it's so cool and amazing what they did. I mean, it took a little over 2 years for them to finish this whole thing, and it's just absolutely amazing. Underneath in the center at the top, it's done by Jacques-Philippe Lesueur, and it is Victory kind of crowning a what looks like armor, but it used to be Victory crowning Napoleon. But then when he was ousted and you had the Bourbons coming in and they were trying to get rid of anything that reminded them of Napoleon, they got rid of that and then put this just pile of armor. The on either side is the rivers. Those were done by Guillaume Boucher. And then on either side, the frames on the corner of the outer edges, which are pretty amazing, were by Dupasquier. At the very top of it is the horses. And these horses, we might have talked about these before when we talked about a walk around there. But these horses are from originally, they're known as the St. Mark horses. These were date back to the 4th century. They were copper. They were made for Constantinople. In 1204, the Venetians looted these. They cut the heads off of them so they could pull them off of this roof, and they took them to Venice. And in 1254, they put them on the top of St. Mark's. 500 years later, here comes this little Corsican general guy coming through in 1797, and he takes them. He takes them from Venice and he puts them in his big caravan and he sends them up to Paris. And in 1806, they had put them up and on top of the Arc de Triomphe. Originally, Denon wanted this huge lead statue of Napoleon put behind the horses in this chariot. And he actually had it created and it stays in the Louvre now. But Napoleon actually said, no, 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 this isn't about me. This is about my army. So I don't want that up there. Surprisingly so.
I'm surprised that he was like, yeah, why?
He wasn't that arrogant all the time, just most of the time. But in behind it on this chariot was Renowned, which is Victory. So when they in 1815, the Venice were like, give us back our stuff. We want these things back after he was ousted. And so the French government at the time hemmed and hawed. So the Venetians plan this whole heist in the middle of the night. Again, think about this is 1815. So you can't just plan a heist to hoist something down. Like now they could drive in some kind of giant machinery, tie chains to it and pull it off. Back in 1815, I doubt they could do that. And they took them in the middle of the night and took them back down to Venice. So, but what they had done here in France already is they had made copies of them. So when they were taken, they were then replaced in 1827 and replaced with copies finally put up there. But the funny thing is that Venice originally stole them from Constantinople. So
Why?
when they said, give us back our things, I'm like, but you stole them in the first place.
Yeah, seriously, you did it first.
You stole them first. Maybe they should go back to Constantinople. And you'll remember the Venetians in Constantinople. This is also around the time of the whole Crown of Thorns because Constantinople, that emperor, had owed money to Venice, to the Venetians. And in basically for collateral, he gave them the Crown of Thorns. So they kept, they're holding on to the Crown of Thorns and then stealing their horses.
I mean,
Rude.
as one does, it happens to the best of us.
I mean, sometimes this is what happens when you leave your, fourth century copper horses sticking around. In Venice, there's copies now on top of St. Mark's, and the originals are put away. But they do say now that they are probably the oldest copper statues in existence to this day, which is amazing. But the horses and everything were copied by Francois Joseph Bossio. He recreated the chariot because when they took all these things down, they basically destroyed it. So they destroyed the chariot. There was also the two angel allegories on either side. They destroyed. So basically everything had to be replaced. Under Louis the 18th, inside the chariot, he had the Victory holding the scepter, and the scepter at the end of it had what looked like Louis the 18th sitting on his throne, and that's all gone now. I've seen a terracotta version of it, a picture of it on the Louvre website, but I've never seen the actual thing. But if you look at it today, and they're all beautifully cleaned and restored and amazing. On the left, the allegory in gold is peace, and on the right is victory. But if you're around there and you're looking, if you're on the ground, look to the left and the right on the ground, and you also see two statues. On the north side, it's France victorious, and on the south side, she represents history. These were done by Francois Gerard, and those used to be at one point up on top of the Arc de Triomphe.
I love that it's all connected.
It's all amazing. And also some of the like when you look at it, there's these beautiful pink columns, pink marble columns. Those were left over from the Petit Trianon and the Trianon out at Versailles. So some of those pieces and some of the marble that was on there was actual marble that dated back to the 17th century that was just sitting around that Louis the 14th had gathered. And that's part of why it just started falling apart because the marble at the time, there were just these huge, rectangles of marble and squares of marble. They weren't really stored properly. So they were, by the time they got them to put into the Arc de Triomphe, they were already in pretty bad shape. So when they redid a lot of the work, they used 20 square meters of new Carrara marble. Cost 5.5 million euros to do it, but all of that was done from 4,500 donors that donated money for the restoration there. And it's pretty amazing. It's fine. It's so nice that it's finally done because it was just this massive site for so long. But definitely go and check it out and look all the way around it and do it in the morning when nobody's there.
Yeah, I love it early in the morning when the sun's coming up and it's got that beautiful light shining through it.
Oh, it is so, and when, I did a video about it that I will link to, so I'll walk you through and show you all of these things. And it was during I think it was during the Paralympics or in between the two Olympics because the balloon was still in the Tuileries in the garden. So you could see that through, if you're standing on one side and you're looking toward the garden, you would see that through the Arc de Triomphe. So it's kind of nice that, I have that captured, but it is really beautiful. We'll do one someday where we talk all about the details on the Arc de Triomphe, but this is the one that Napoleon paid for and had built and actually got to see. The other one, sadly, he did not, but he would, walk through this on his way in and out of the Tuileries, or I'm sure somebody, carried him.
He rode his horse. Well,
He rode
thanks
his
for
horse.
listening, guys, and definitely check out ClaudineHemingway.com and tune in next week. Thanks for listening today, guys. If you're interested in learning more about Claudine, her tours, history, and the beautiful photographs that she posts all over Instagram, tune into her website, ClaudineHemingway.com.